If you're considering seeing this movie, why? Hi everybody, Anthony here from Awesome Anthony Productions, and today I'm going to give you my review of The Crow. But before we get started, you know exactly what to do. At the end of the video, if you think I've earned it, please leave a like, subscribe, and ring that bell so you never miss any of my new reviews. Now let's get into it. Well, another remake of a well-regarded classic. Let's see how it holds up. Okay, technically this isn't a remake of 1994's The Crow, starring the late Brandon Lee, who was unfortunately accidentally killed while filming the film's final shootout scene. Rest in peace. That movie itself was actually an adaptation of James O'Barr's graphic novel from 1989, and this is just another adaptation of that. However, this movie was always going to be compared to that 90s gothic action horror classic, and when that was going to be done, this was always going to fall short. But on its own merits, does this movie actually work at all? No, not really. To be totally honest, this movie kinda sucks. But I will say, even though I am fully aware of the laundry list of problems that it has, I had fun watching it. It's kind of a fun bad movie. But speaking of those problems, let's start with the lead characters. Just like the rest of his family, I think that Bill Skarsgård is a fantastic actor who has already proven his range. He can be scary, dramatic, and even a badass action hero. So why doesn't the movie really capitalize on any of that? As Eric Draven, Skarsgård has none of the charisma or likability of Brandon Lee. Instead, the writers, producers, directors, whatever the hell, they gave him the personality of a wet mop, combined with very cringy dialogue and a character design that kind of brings to mind Jared Leto's Joker. And he doesn't even really become the proper Crow until the last 20 minutes or so. They really dragged out this origin story. Speaking of his origin, this version of Shelley, played by FKA Twigs, has many of the same shortcomings. She doesn't have his dumb tattoos, but she's just as devoid of personality, and all of her dialogue just made me physically cringe, just like with Eric's character. None of this is helped by the fact that these two just aren't very likable, or the fact that they have basically nothing in the way of backstory or development, so we pretty much know nothing about these characters. I also didn't really buy their chemistry together, so by the time that she's killed and Eric goes on post-mortem revenge, I wasn't drawn into the emotional part of the story at all. And then there is the fantastic Danny Houston as this film's villain, and all I can say to that is, huh? Nothing about the villain makes any kind of sense here. I guess he's some crime lord or drug kingpin or something, but he really just stands there mean mugging and monologuing, and he also has random powers seemingly given to him by the devil where he can talk to somebody and mind control them or something, but none of that is well defined at all, just leaves you with way more questions than answers. There's also nothing really here that gives any weight to the confrontation between him and Eric Draven. I mean, yeah, he ordered his goons to kill Shelley, but him and Eric don't even really meet face to face and have a confrontation until the very end, and it doesn't really feel earned at all. This movie really would have benefited if they would have met each other and maybe fought once or twice before we actually get to the ending. And just like with the rest of the characters here, Houston's dialogue is just bland and cringeworthy. Speaking of cringe, this soundtrack is firmly rooted in that as well. It feels like it belonged in some emo goth movie from the early 2000s much more than this. I mean, this is an ultra-violent, dark action movie, but whenever the music kicked in, it completely took me out of it. I could keep going, talking about what's wrong in this movie, from the cringy dialogue to the fact that nothing, like the motivation of the villain or Eric's powers or the villain's powers, are ever really explained, and everything in between. But the last thing I want to criticize here is this movie's sheer lack of any heart. Now, even though I like the original 90s movie, I may get some flack for this, but I always thought it was kind of cheesy, especially when it came to the dialogue between the characters. But looking past that and the awesome action, there is a ton of heart in that movie. It's not about just bringing Shelley back from the dead like Eric's mission is here, but rather for Eric to protect an impoverished little girl that is just stuck in a grim reality and then finally get to reunite with his love in the afterlife. That's really powerful, and it worked in that movie, but this completely throws that right out the window, instead replacing it with a generic revenge story, with no real levity to be found here either. Like, I don't even think there's one real joke in this movie. It just makes the whole thing feel depressing and like it completely missed the point of this character. That all being said, I really want to praise this movie for one thing: the action. I watched the original Crow again on my flight back from Scotland, funny enough, to prepare for this movie, and what really surprised me in that movie, besides how cheesy the dialogue was that there's a lot of violence involving stabbing and shootings, but there's hardly any blood and virtually no gore whatsoever. Here, they do the opposite and take the violence as far as it can go with very gory results. And I honestly was really into it, and I thought it worked very well, even though the rest of the movie doesn't work at all, with the last 15 minutes being probably the most fun that I had in this dreary 2-hour runtime. The hits land hard, the stabbings and shootings have very brutal results, and something that I thought was the coolest part, whenever Eric suffers a very traumatic injury, we get to see in graphic detail how his body pulls itself back together. And I thought it was cool, and the effects on it were pretty solid. So even though the rest of this movie is a completely misguided, edgy, cringe-worthy train wreck, I will defend the action in this movie until my dying breath. It's exciting, well choreographed, super visceral, and very gory, surprisingly so. Though it's really not enough to save this movie from its edgy melodrama, unlikable and completely underdeveloped characters, a story and villain that hardly make any sense, and a total loss of all the charm that was present in the 90s movie. And that's my review of The Crow. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this review, you know exactly what to do. Please leave a like, subscribe, and ring that bell so you never miss any of my new reviews. While you're at it, you can scroll down in the description below, find the links to my socials, leave a comment, let me know if you're one of the 100 people that saw this movie because it's a total flop. And of course, if you want more of my content, you can click or tap on these cards right here. They'll take you to my review of Alien Romulus, or just over to my channel where you can check out the rest of my reviews and my shorts. Thanks for watching, everybody, and I will see you next time for my review of Beetlejuice.